here, and we want to welcome you to what we are hoping is going to be a very fruitful conversation around some things that are happening in the landscape in the valley. So I thank you all for being here despite the wind and the weather this morning. My name is Greg Edwards. I'm the senior pastor of Resurrected Life Community Church in the city of Allentown, and also the president and chief executive officer of the Resurrected Community Development Corporation. At this table, I serve as the co-chair of the Water Fountain Project and one of the co-authors of the Justice for All document that hopefully all of you have received, along with the agenda for our time together. And I'll allow my co-chair to introduce herself.
Good morning. My name is Olga Negron. I'm a community activist, and like you heard, I'm co-chairing this with an incredible and powerful group of leaders of Lehigh Valley. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to, first of all, recognize our Congressman Charlie Dane. Thank you so much for your time, for being here with us. Our Congressman Matt Cartwright regretted not being able to be in here. He had planned to do so, but we have April here with us who will say some remarks on behalf of our Congressman. Thank you, April, for being here with us.
Okay, thank you, Olga. I'd like to take the time to set the context for our conversation. Many of us that are from the Valley know that there have been other reports and work such as this to a certain extent done, and sometimes it never moves beyond the written page. So my hope is that we move beyond the document and get into some serious discussion before we leave here. But I'd like to read from the preface of the book that's in front of you, because I think it sets the context for some of the points we'd like to make. The United States has a problem with race. It is real. It is discrete and it is indiscreet. Depending on who you are and how you feel about it, how you see it and hear it, racism does or doesn't exist. In fact, denying that racism exists actually is the new racism. If we pretend it doesn't exist, we can ignore the pain it causes and the role nearly every one of us plays. Those in a position to ignore the pain get to keep the benefits. Those not continue to pay the ultimate price. To be sure, the data suggests that we have made little progress since Brown v. Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act, and the Economic Opportunity Act, which grew out of the unrest that consumed our society more than 50 years ago. And the first African American to graduate from that prestigious institution, Harvard University, W.E.B. Du Bois, said that the color line is, in fact, the issue of the 20th century, and here we sit, still dealing with issues of the color line. We might not see whites-only signs on water fountains or at restaurants, but the lack of diversity at many places of employment or in our boardrooms is a clear indication that we have not yet achieved the goal of equal opportunity that so many Americans embrace. We can do better. So our discussion and the report in front of you is designed to offer discussions for a role that all of us can play. This isn't about entitlement. It's not about quotas. This is about opportunity and equity and what is fair and what is right. It isn't about charity. It's about justice. This project really is about the middle class and whether people of color who enter the middle class, having played by the same rules, having attended some of the same schools, having acquired a college education, a decent job, and enough money to pay bills, reap the same benefits, building assets and accumulating net worth as their white counterparts. The idealists will believe we can solve these problems. The realists know it will be difficult. The fatalist will usually drop out. And what is clear is that our society is far more threatened when poverty and desperation lead to apathy and dependence than when it leads to anger and activism. So many of us are idealists. Many more are realists. We hope the realists will embrace some of the things that we're about to say in the report that's in front of you and acknowledge that enough is enough and look for ways to give life to this project and this work in our lives, institutions, neighborhoods, and the communities that we serve, the churches that we worship, and the organizations that we represent. And with that, I would like to take the time to introduce our advisory team that has worked with Olga and myself, and I would ask that they stand when their names are called. Phyllis Alexander, Dan Bosket, Camilla Green, Kevin Green. I'm not sure if Julio Garrido's here. Esther Guzman, Tyrone Russell, Cicobet Torres, Lorna Velasquez. They put a lot of hours and a lot of sweat equity into the discussion and the report, and so I want to thank them for serving with excellence and integrity. Thank you.
Talking, this group of incredible, powerful leaders got been working together and discussed and went over a presentation of the data and research that the consortium put together, and we're going to hear a little more about it. So I'd like to introduce Michelle Mercer-Deegan, Lehigh Valley Research Consortium. If you can please introduce us.
Sure. Thank you very much, Pastor Greg and Olga, for giving me a chance to talk about the research. The Lehigh Valley Research Consortium worked with the advisory board to pull together data that we had collected and other organizations around the Lehigh Valley who conduct research had collected on the issue of race and wealth in the Lehigh Valley. So what is presented in the report is a summary of our findings. We have many more, but we put some of the key findings into this report. The report itself begins on page 16, so you have the report in front of you. If you want to look through the report as I talk, that might be very helpful to capture some of the important points of what I'm going to say in the next few minutes. Essentially, what our results conclude is that race and ethnicity matter. Let me give you this perspective. If you are an African American or Latino child in the Lehigh Valley, your parents are more likely to earn less income than their white counterparts, and you are more likely to live in a rented home. Or if your parents own a home, it is worth less than that of white families living in suburban areas. You attend, or are likely to attend, school in a district with higher levels of students in poverty. You are likely to score less well on statewide student outcome measures and are less likely to go to college. Lack of a college degree means that on average, you will earn less, making it difficult for you to save for a home mortgage, to buy a home, and save for retirement. Overall, accumulating less wealth in your lifetime and continuing this unrelenting cycle of intergenerational inequality. So I'm now going to go through different parts of the report to highlight and connect all of these different indicators together. I first want to start with the topic of income. Income, as you know, is a key contributor to a middle-class person's wealth. If you have enough income, as I said, you can enroll in higher education, buy a home, and save for retirement. All factors that increase an individual's personal wealth. In the Lehigh Valley, as is the case elsewhere, income levels for historically underrepresented groups are below those for non-Hispanic whites. This fact is well documented in the literature. In the Lehigh Valley, the median income for white households is 40% higher than for blacks and over 60% higher for Latinos of any race. When we look at a map of the Lehigh Valley by census tract, we see that census tracts with the lowest median incomes and the highest poverty rates are located in Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, and Whitehall, municipalities in the Lehigh Valley where many Latino and African American residents reside. So, income is spatially connected to your address. Income is also connected to educational outcomes. The areas in the Lehigh Valley with the poorest residents are also located in school districts reporting lower student outcomes. PSSA results in math and reading consistently show that poor school districts which tend to be those with higher percentages of minority students, score less well on standardized tests. We know from the literature that reading at grade level, particularly grades 3 and 4, is a predictor of future school and economic success. And these results tell us that in the Lehigh Valley, our poorer students of color are at a disadvantage. Failure to succeed by today's standards on these tests leads to a lack of incentive to engage in higher education. SAT scores or SAT tests are a marker of interest in college. If we just focus, as we did in the report, on the number of test takers by race and ethnicity, we know that fewer students from these historically underrepresented groups are taking an important step towards college and actually taking the SAT exam. For example, in 2007, only 4% of all test takers, SAT test takers, were African American, and 8% of those taking the test were Latino, compared to 79% of test takers identifying as white non-Hispanic. Nationally, results are similar to the Lehigh Valley. As recently as 2012, College Board reported low numbers of Hispanic and African American students taking the exam nationwide. While the numbers of students taking the exam from these groups last year actually increased, it increased only because College Board began to issue waivers so that students didn't have to pay the fee in order to take the exam. And although some colleges are making the SAT optional, many colleges still require an SAT for admission. So this test remains a barrier for college entry for many students. In addition to the SAT, the cost of higher education can also be prohibitive, particularly for students who are from middle income and poorer families, whose parents may not have attended college. For these reasons, it is likely that fewer students who are Latino or African American go on to pursue a college degree. And in fact, data tells us that this is the case. So it is no surprise when fewer Hispanic and African American residents in the Lehigh Valley, and in general in the U.S., take the SAT, and knowing the high ticket price of college, we see lower levels of educational attainment for these groups. Fewer than 13% of Latino adults living in the Lehigh Valley earned a 4-year degree, and only 18% of Black residents compared to 27% of non-white Hispanic residents. We know that as educational attainment increases, on average, income increases. So without a college degree, even an associate's degree, these adults are at a disadvantage. So race and ethnicity is correlated to family income, which is correlated to a child's educational outcomes and future educational attainment. It is clear that income as a measure of wealth favors whites. Education as a contributor to income accumulation favors whites. Race is also connected to housing disparities, as I will now discuss. Owning a home is another key factor in wealth accumulation for the middle class. However, because African American and Hispanic residents earn less, they face a much more limited housing stock and are less able to obtain a home mortgage, making home ownership much more difficult. In the Lehigh Valley, the average price of a home of a white resident is 17% higher than that of an African American and 29% higher than a Hispanic resident. Homes that are affordable are in those school districts with the lowest student outcomes, continuing the cycle of stagnation in wealth accumulation for Blacks and Latinos. For example, the average price of a home in Allentown, which has the highest concentration of Latino households, is $95,000, compared to the Southern Lehigh School District, homes in the Southern Lehigh School District, with only a 3% Latino population, and a median home value price of about $270,000. It is clear that wealth, measured by home value, favors whites. The last piece of data I'd like to share shows us just how hard it is to get ahead if you are from a historically underrepresented group in the Lehigh Valley. Data on home loan approval rates in the Lehigh Valley. So this is data from all lenders across the United States where people have applied for loans, not just banks in the Lehigh Valley, suggests that whites, regardless of income, are more likely to be approved by a lender than Black or Latino applicants. About 70% of white low-income applicants received a loan in 2011 compared to only 52% of high-income blacks and 54% of high-income Latinos. While there are many reasons for loan denial, such as poor credit scores or an inability to pay for a down payment, the story is clear. In the Lehigh Valley, home ownership is more easily accessible for whites. So in summary, the data leaves us with many more questions than we've answered, and we know as researchers that we have much more to do to understand the complexity of the intractability of wealth inequality in the Lehigh Valley. But luckily, rather than wait for more research and recognizing that the need is great, the task force has already begun to formulate solutions to reduce wealth inequality in the Lehigh Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. At the beginning, we're going to have now a member of Congress say a couple of words, and then we're going to do, Pastor Greg and I will do a presentation, a brief presentation of the recommendations based on the research, and then we as a group will then have a conversation about the recommendations and what else we could be doing. So now I would like to, first of all, again, thank Congressman Charlie Dane from the 15th District. Thank you so much, Charlie, for being in here. You've always been a great supporter of our work and our community. So, and I know you have a very tight schedule, so it means a lot to have you here. And I know that even though we'll keep a conversation, and we will always keep a conversation with you as we always have, I know you might have to leave at some point during the meeting, so I want to let everybody know that that's what's going to happen. But thank you, Charlie, and your turn now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Olga, and thank you, everybody here, Alan Jennings, and everybody else who's been involved with putting together this program, for having me here to give you some thoughts from a federal perspective on the issue of wealth disparity or income inequality, call it what you will. We've all seen the public debate surrounding wealth disparity intensify, in recent years, and certainly news reports and articles and editorials across the country. It's a very big issue, and I think it's important that we do have a discussion, a good discussion, and we should talk on what these issues are, and the many economic issues from the impacts of public policy, both local, state, federal, to personal financial decisions. I think we should look at all this. Statistics about wealth and income disparity are varied, and they are often nuanced. There are a lot of big reports that you've probably seen in recent years, the Piketty report and others that have gotten a lot of national attention. I'm going to let some of the economists debate the merits of a lot of those discussions, but I'd like to discuss today are the factors from a federal level that I believe are contributing to wealth disparity in our country. I wanted to start off by saying that the issue of wealth disparity is really not a new problem. We've always had it, and the question is how much of it do we have? But recently we've seen this dramatic. It's increased. There's no question that it's increased. But and why is that? Okay, well, let's talk about a few realities. We live in a market-based economy, and there always are going to be some levels of income disparity or income inequality. There are all sorts of disparity. In the report, a lot of talk about racial disparities that contribute to income disparities, but there are skills disparities. You mentioned educational disparities, risk disparities, family disparities. I would argue all contribute to this notion of wealth disparity or income inequality. In fact, I think in our country, we've spoken a lot about this issue, and truthfully, the President of the United States, President Obama, talks a lot about income inequality, and I would argue we've seen a lot more of it. And I believe it's in part, not entirely, but it's in part attributed to some of the policies of his administrations and prior administrations that are contributing and are compounding the problems. And we have to fix the policies that make it harder for people to earn more money. I think that's a big part of it. I'd like to focus on three main issues that I believe have a tremendous impact on the wealth disparity in the U.S. The economy, monetary policy at the Federal Reserve level, and tax policy. First, our economy is still slowly recovering from the financial crisis and recession. I've often called this recovery the part-time recovery. It just has not. It has moved in fits and starts. We've seen better data in the last 2 quarters, but it's been a very erratic, not a very durable recovery. In 2007, the number of workers who had their hours cut or were unable to find full-time jobs was 4.4 million. In June of this year, those ranks reached 7.5 million. People are getting their hours cut. One reason for this has been the change in the definition. It's not the only reason, but one reason has been the change in the definition of full-time work. Under the health care law, back down to 30 hours. This is more than anecdotal. We are seeing many Americans having their hours reduced below 30 hours to comply with the impending employer mandate. The rise, and that's a policy decision. The rise in part-time work is also related to another lingering problem in the job market, and that's long-term unemployment. There are 2.9 million people, or 32% of the unemployed, have been jobless for 27 weeks or more, about 6 months or more. That's a long time. And according to a recent analysis from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, the long-term unemployed are more likely to take part-time work, and that this is a significant factor holding back wage growth in this country. And that's the other issue. Wages are simply not growing. The consequences of these factors are lower wage growth in general, particularly for lower income individuals, and less opportunities, which really means less ability to increase wealth. And so, one thing that we're going to try to deal with at some point is redefine full-time work, at least under the health care law, back to 40 hours so that people don't get their hours cut. That's driving down wages for a lot of Americans. We also need certainly a more stable, predictable atmosphere in Washington to deal with these issues. There's no doubt that lurching from one government crisis to the next, one cliff to the next cliff, potential default or shutdowns or whatever, has also given, I think, some employers cause for some concern. It speaks to stability or lack of stability and lack of certainty, and that affects growth in the economy. And that's the issue we need to also talk about. How do you grow an economy? If we assume that the pie is finite, then we are going to have some nasty fights in this country. If we can make sure that pie is growing, then we can try to make sure that more people are partaking in that particular pie. I want to also mention something about monetary policy and the Federal Reserve. And frankly, I can make a case that monetary policy has not helped a lot of working Americans in recent years. Interest rates remaining persistently near 0% have discouraged the use of savings. And with interest rates near zero, those who can afford the cost, the cost turn to the equity markets, to the stock market, to gain any sort of useful return on their money. What's happened essentially is a lot of wealthy people have been driving their money into the stock market. The wealthier are getting wealthier. That's what's happening, largely as a result, in part, because of this monetary policy. And it is concerning, and some would argue that we are creating another bubble in the stock market, and that this could, stocks at some point will likely come down. I don't pretend to be an expert on the stock market, but it's certainly clear in all the data and research I've seen that money is being driven into the stock market because of the current Federal Reserve policies. So the result is often self-reinforcing. Those who can invest in the markets, in the most part, since the economic crisis, have seen returns on their investments, and they are getting wealthier. Those who can afford the expense are left back at the station, watching the train pull away. The irony lies in the causal link between monetary policy that has driven investors towards equities and commodities, and the resultant increase in the price of commodities like meat, bread, and agricultural products. Who ends up being burdened by higher food prices? Families and individuals with lower incomes. So we set up quite a cycle. Finally, I'd like to discuss the need for major changes to our nation's tax policy. And, for example, I know many people in this room are probably supportive of programs like expanding the earned income tax credit, which has helped a lot of folks who are lower income. But our current system of taxation is become a hodgepodge, a conglomeration of, truthfully, a lot of special income breaks and favors and preferences. It's overly complex. It's mind-numbingly complex, to be perfectly candid. 70,000 plus pages long, and actually it disincentivizes taxpayers. And truthfully, a lot of small businesses and a lot of individuals, by the way, who don't itemize, from doing what they would hope to do. We've all heard recently about businesses keeping their profits overseas to take advantage of lower tax rates. But what a lot of these businesses won't return their money, their profits, to the United States. You know what? The federal tax code discourages them from bringing the money back to the United States. That's the reality that we live in. I mean, trillions of dollars sitting overseas that need to be brought back into America and invested here. But the tax policy discourages American headquartered companies from bringing their profits back into our country. So we need to fix that as a way to help drive investment in the U.S. and growth. I mean, growth is ultimately, I think, one of the most important ways we are going to deal with this issue of income disparity. And again, that's by creating good family-sustaining wages. That's how we're going to deal with this issue. I could go into all the issues of skill shortage. I've talked with Alan and others in this room at length about my concerns with the skills deficit in our country during the worst moments of our recession in 08 and 09 and in 010. I was so concerned about the numbers of unfilled positions there were throughout the manufacturing and industrial sector. At that time, it was estimated nationally over 600,000 jobs were unfilled. And that was a conservative number. That those jobs are unfilled because people simply didn't have the skills to fill them. And that's what was really alarming and depressing. So how do we make sure people have the skills they need? It gets back to the educational system. Bottom line, we must do much better, because ultimately jobs are going to go to where the skill sets are. We know that. If the skill sets aren't here, they're going to go to where they are. If they're in China or India or some developing country, that's where they're going to go. I guess I'd say that on the tax code, I just want to say one thing. It's gotten long past time that we simplify this code. And I'm not talking about tax code, but at least making the rates, bring them down, but broaden the base. Broaden the base, and I think we would have a fairer, simpler system. You would still have brackets, but we're going to have to, I believe, at some point move in that direction. Nearly two-thirds of Americans don't itemize their taxes. I mean, that's what we live in. So all these preferences really are not helping a lot of folks. You can't take advantage of them. With that, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody here. I hope my comments are helping in terms of this discussion. And I know you're going to be saying a lot more in the roundtable, but this is an important issue, and this is one that we are going to have to confront. And in addition to the racial issues that I've identified, I think we must also talk about these social other causes out there. I mean, particularly education. I think we would all agree here too that education, can really help equalize a lot of situations. That's the question that I think you're going to discuss here as well. How do you deal with that? And one thing I noticed in the report, and I'll stop. One thing I noticed in that report, was interesting, and I read a black and white version. I didn't have a color version, so I couldn't. So I was trying to understand when I read through it. I couldn't quite figure out but I was looking at Parkland and Nazareth school districts, and I noticed that the children, it seemed, of African American, Hispanic, white, tended to perform at more comparable levels in some of the, I forgot it was math, but in some of the areas they were much more comparable, and I suspected it had to do with the fact that perhaps, the incomes were probably more equal in those districts, and I thought that was interesting. That that maybe in those districts, there wasn't a lot of disparity between the educational attainment levels, and I think that was a sign of encouragement. And one final thing I wanted to say too. We live in a great country, and and there's a lot of prosperity here, and we're blessed in our country that we have all this prosperity. And I would also argue that that prosperity is a result of the fact that we have rule of law, that we have economic and political freedom, unlike a lot of other places around the world. And I would also argue we have property rights. And I often worry, too, that if power becomes too concentrated, you will see less prosperity and one heck of a lot more cronyism. And, and I know we're always trying to strike the right balance here in our country. Whenever, we're trying to seek perfection, and we just can't ever quite attain it. And I suspect we never will, but we keep trying. But I always think of the old former Soviet Union, where we were told, and that system imploded, it collapsed upon itself, where everybody was going to have equal what they needed. But even there, when power was so concentrated, there was cronyism. So there were some people who benefited very much, and the rest of the population were fairly equal, equally miserable, equally poor. That's the other extreme that I think we all would recognize as a failure. So in our country, we've got to figure out a way to make turn our freedoms and make sure that we can maintain our prosperity, while at the same time making sure that those who aren't, who aren't enjoying it to the extent that they should, can get an opportunity to move ahead. So for that, thank you for allowing me to join you. This has been a very, I appreciate this opportunity to present to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Again, I know that we always have an open conversation with Charlie in the office. We like to give 2 minutes to April Nigger from Matt Cartwright's office. You have a couple of words I'd like to share on behalf of our congressman.
Yeah, I'll just read from his letter, but portions. He wrote a statement in response to the report, and he writes, I'm going to read from his voice, if it's easier to read that way. Thank you for graciously inviting me to participate in the Justice for All Challenging Wealth Disparity in the Lehigh Valley Congressional Forum. It was my hope to be with you today. Each of you should be commended for your commitment to this cause, and it is my hope you will continue to explore this issue and establish ways to move forward in the Lehigh Valley towards greater social equity. I believe the task force is asking important questions that must be explored if we are to close the wealth gap, which widened during the recession. One important step towards that goal is closing gaps in educational achievement. Thank you. Which is too often seen in schools with a concentration of minorities and low-income families. It is a fundamental part of our democratic system that all youth have equal access to the tools of economic and personal success, and how schools are funded contributes to disparity in access. The recent gubernatorial race demonstrated the significance of a fair funding formula to the people of Pennsylvania. And it is imperative we maintain a comprehensive support system if we are to provide equal access to educational resources and keep disadvantaged and minority students enrolled and empowered from universal pre-K through to graduation and on to higher education. In addition to increasing access to educational opportunities, I agree that we should increase access to financial opportunities. This can begin with the institution of a living wage. I applaud the task force recommendations to support first-time home buyers and to offer programs that will counsel them once they buy a home, as well as assist in financial planning, giving away the recommendations. And also with wealth management, particularly into the senior years. We need to understand the barriers to home ownership, to getting mortgages approved, and why home values are less than their peers. Home ownership has been a vehicle to the middle class, and we need to protect that dream. I believe there is room for common sense legislation to protect and empower consumers. It has never been more important for people to possess the financial literacy needed to avoid a cycle of debt. Increasing access to educational resources and to tools for building wealth are important goals for realizing our nation's potential. Increasing our respect for diversity and culture from our classrooms to our boardrooms and into our financial institutions are important steps towards ensuring empowerment for those who have been historically disadvantaged. This study has laid out disparities in the Lehigh Valley. It has also raised questions that will need to be explored if we are to find a way forward. I hope this task force will form alliances to bring their recommendations to life. Ideally, the effort will be an example across the state and the nation. Sincerely, Matt Cartwright.
Thank you, April. Thank you. And
So we have a very austere task force that has spent a great amount of time on the recommendations. There is no silver bullet, right, to wealth disparity. So please don't take this, the recommendations that we make as, if you will, I guess I can say this as the preacher, one of the preachers in the room, the gospel. It is a beginning point for the conversation. And we know that the recommendations will hopefully be received with the same spirit that they were written in. So if you turn, if you will, to page 9 in your report, we'd like to go through some of them, not verbatim, word for word, but we certainly would like to go through some of them with you. In the area of education, first of all, the task force vehemently agrees that the quality of education should not depend on your zip code, that your zip code should not be a direct corollary to your level of education or detrimental to your capacity to create wealth for yourself. So what we are asking for is, and what we are calling for, is an end to educational apartheid, specifically in this Lehigh Valley, that needs to end. And so we're recommending that Congress declare that equal access to educational opportunity through the nation's public schools is the law of the land. Through the courts, if necessary, it should give communities the resources needed to end separate and unequal public education. So that's a recommendation in the area of education. Number 2, we would like to also state that communities that embrace our schools are significant, and also schools that embrace our communities. And I would add to that, communities that love our children and embrace our children, and schools that love our children, to create a level of connectedness with the soul of every child. We believe on the task force that education, according to Paulo Freire, should be the practice of freedom, and it should allow children to fully participate in their humanity, regardless of where they live. So we are recommending that schools serving Black and Latino students organize in such a way that the entire organization implements an educational process that teaches critical thinking, leadership skills, and the empowerment of children so that they actively participate, learn to challenge convention, and continue to be hopeful despite the challenges all around them. And that's a fancy way of saying, a long way of saying that we think that the pedagogical approach in our schools needs to change, that the way we teach needs to change to meet the demands of our students. Educationally, we also believe that there needs to be diversification of all of our schools, diversification in terms of the teachers, the faculty, and the administration, that there's got to be faces in those positions that reflect the racial and cultural composition of the student body. And so to that end, we're recommending that school districts across this Lehigh Valley commit to providing the training resources needed to equip their existing faculty and staff with the competency that is required to overcome the roadblocks to understanding those racial and cultural differences and successfully teaching Black and Latino students. We are also, in regards to that, stating that we believe that every child, specifically children that are coming from high poverty, low income areas, have an access to a healthy start, a safe start, a fair start, and a head start. That every child should have a mandatory early childhood experience. And we recommend that every low income child, especially in urban communities, have access to quality pre-kindergarten education, and we would give this investment in children entitlement status. We also believe that improving the likelihood that students of color will be admitted to a school with the right fit and affordability. And so we're recommending that a network of volunteers be recruited specifically on the basis of the statistics that we heard from the report, that 4%, that ought to shock us, that ought to just send something through your spine, that 4% of African American students in the Lehigh Valley sat for SATs. That's deeply disturbing. And so we're saying that there ought to be a network of volunteers recruited and trained to coach high school students on how to find the right school and prepare them for that experience, and also the SAT examinations. We're believing that we also should create partnerships with local colleges and universities, that our local colleges, Lafayette in particular, Lehigh, Moravian, Muhlenberg, Cedar Crest, and our 2 community colleges ought to partner with the high schools so that we can create an effective pipeline to begin to effectuate change. We recommend that the Lehigh Valley colleges and universities train teachers to establish a task force to develop a strong partnership with those local school districts to create a comprehensive school-based program specifically geared around financial literacy. And we're recommending that local colleges and universities commit to an equitable number of scholarships, a fair number of scholarships, 30 to 50 per year, to children of color in the Lehigh Valley. We are also recommending that the local employers within the Lehigh Valley provide subsidies to these children for their employees to take, provide subsidies for their employees to take advantage of the resources that they have available to them. And we know that there are many employers, some of which are around the table, that have provided opportunities for their workforce to go back to school, and we appreciate the contributions that they're making to the local economy as well. And that's the recommendations that we have, moreover, in the area of education.
Very good. Now, the time today, reading through the book, everybody has it, and you have your time to go over it. So I'm going to review some, talking about improving the financial literacy. So I chose just a couple of the many recommendations that we have in here. So wealth disparity begins with income disparity. We propose setting the minimum wage at a living wage level. As President Roosevelt proposed, the wage should be indexed for inflation to prevent politics from setting low-wage workers back. We also support the protections in place of prohibit discrimination in hiring and promoting, but suggest to Congress to explore ideas for making them more effective. And of course, I have to mention in here, I was glad to hear from feedback from both of our congressmen that they agree that we need to definitely set a living wage. So we are definitely supporting and proposing that it has had to happen. Creating wealth through entrepreneurship. There are successful community-based programs in the Lehigh Valley that foster entrepreneurship among disadvantaged constituents. These programs offer seminars covering the wide range of skills and knowledge needed to start and sustain small business. There's also technical assistance available and special programs that offer financing to these new businesses. These programs should be protected and even enhanced in order to promote entrepreneurship among minorities. Then reducing the barriers of home ownership. We also have many programs that support home ownership of first-time home buyers in our community. But we are also recommending the task force recommended proposed coordination of post-home ownership counseling program marketed to the homeowners of colors. And the counseling program, once you get to own a home, how we want to make sure that we can keep it, that they know everything they need to know in order to keep the home, as it's going to help with the asset building. And the counseling program, we suggest that will include topics as home maintenance, payment of property taxes, and refinancing. I'm going to let you to go to the last.
So that covers some of our recommendations in regards to education, and also in regards to not all but some of the financial recommendations that we're going to make. Another big area that we looked at, because we know that the Lehigh Valley area is a very philanthropic area with a great deal of nonprofits and a great deal of foundations, and we're thankful for their presence. But when we looked at their boards and who are on the boards, what we saw was there is some noticeable absence of persons of color. And so, and we understand that for a variety of reasons, but we would say that if our foundations and our boards, our 501c3s, in fact, if they are in existence to advance the public good, but they are not representing all of the public, then the question we ask is, what good do we do? And so what we are asking is that we look at our foundations, all of them, and that every organization that operates with a tax-exempt status or in the broader interest of the region take steps to diversify their decision-making bodies so that the outcomes that they produce are more robust, are more collaborative, are really more reflective of the constituency that they're seeking to serve. I think in that regards, what we'll find are some different decisions that will happen. And I think that some of the programs and initiatives that some of those foundations make will actually get to the persons to whom they were designed to get to. Sometimes we have good intentions, and that's a good thing. But you know the cliche about good intentions. And so we've got to have more than good intentions. We have to diversify. And I understand when we diversify our boards, that means that sometimes there's divergent thinking. And there might be different hours we have to set so that, folk can get there who normally don't have the luxury of being at a board meeting at 11 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're asking everybody to look at how they're operating and to maybe think about doing some things differently so we can have different outcomes. Okay?
Good. The last several months that we've been working, the task force, after we went over the data, we actually looked for some advice. And we have here with us our advisors that it was really important for us to have such important pillars of our community to guide us and give us some feedback. And I'm just going to mention the name quickly, and then any of you can speak if you like. Chris Martin from Martin Guitars, Richard Master from MCS Industries, and Bob Ruppel from formerly from Team Capital. Their perspective as key members in our community was really important. So if any of you would like to share some words, I will introduce.
When Alan asked me to attend a preliminary meeting with this group, I got to thinking about there is a lot of opportunity in the Lehigh Valley. You know, it wasn't that long ago that people said, "Oh, what's going to happen when Bethlehem Steel goes away?" Well, look at the Route 33 corridor. Look at all those new businesses there. Now, one of the big differences is the corporate headquarters aren't here, so we have to try and find a way to connect with these businesses when the corporate headquarters is somewhere else. I mentioned when we met a couple of weeks ago that we've been hiring, but we're located in Nazareth, and part of the challenge is getting folks to work. There's work to be had in the Lehigh Valley. There's good work. There's companies that care. We're not the only company that subsidizes education. I will tell you, we have a very rigorous hiring process. So one of the things may be to teach young people, anyone who's looking for a job and struggling, how to do a job interview. Because in our case, it's very often the fact that once we hire you, you might stay until you retire. So we want to make sure the decision is correct from the day that we create that bond between the company and the employee. And I just want to say, I know that minimum wage is a hot button. We don't hire at the minimum wage. I think that's a little demeaning to say to someone, "Welcome aboard, you're worth the minimum." I just think that's a terrible term. I don't want to pay someone the minimum. I want to pay them the maximum we can afford, because I'm going to trust that they're going to give me the maximum they can.
Thank you, Chris. That was very, very meaningful to us. Thank you.
I couldn't get away from Alan. And
he knew that I retired June 1st and wasn't doing anything productive. But seriously, I really did it out of respect for Alan, and we've worked together on a multitude of projects for a long, long period of time. I have a lot of different points of view on this, and probably not enough time to kind of get into a lot of it. I would echo Chris. The last 5 to 7 years when I was at Team Capital Bank, now we were growing, we were a small business, but on a base in 2013 of 125 people, we hired 25 people. And I will tell you, I never thought of the minimum wage. I never thought of those salary issues because every job we had was over the minimum wage. So I heard a term used the other day of workability, and I think Chris touched on it a little bit. I think training our young people on how to dress for an interview, how to make the most positive presentation or representation they can make to give them the chance to succeed is critical. What's the work environment all about? If the day starts at 8 and you show up at 9, you're going to stand out. Probably not in the right way. If your lunch hour is 11 to 12 and you come back at 12:30, again, I think workability and the knowledge of what do entities expect is a critical issue. But I guess my hot button in all of this has been formulated out of 40 years of work experience and having been involved in many different communities, in educational not-for-profits and educational organizations, having spent 9 years on a school board. I think at the end of the day, wealth disparity comes down to educational disparity. And I think that has to start at Head Start, that has to start at kindergarten, that has to start at getting kids ready to hit the ground running when they go to school. Personal opinion, corporate America likes solving problems. They like funding those kinds of programs. I think a mind shift has to be to fund preventative problems. And I think a program that comes to mind, and unfortunately I think it has lost funding and has been disbanded, but was the Sizzle program in Easton. I think just an absolute phenomenal program. And if you don't know about it, just in a nutshell, it's a program where it took Easton-based young kids and gave them an educational and a structured environment over the summer so that they could hit the ground running again in September. And the program allowed those kids to focus on deficiencies and reading issues or whatever they might be during the summer so that they could catch up and be better in September. We need more of those kinds of programs. I was on the board for many years at Communities and Schools. I think absolutely phenomenal program, but one of the things that disturbed me when I was on the board was it was focusing on 9th grade and above. You can't focus on, I'm not suggesting we throw 9th graders away and ignore them, but if you focus on 2nd graders or 1st graders or kindergartners, you're going to have to spend less time with 9th graders when they get to be 9th graders. So I think at the end of the day, if we figure out how to deal with educational disparity, wealth disparity takes care of itself.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, we've done a lot of talking. A few of us have done a lot of talking, most of the talking, and now hopefully we can do some more talking, but hear from some other voices that we haven't heard from. So I'm going to introduce Kevin Green. Kevin is a member of our task committee, and he's going to lead us into a discussion about some of the things that you've heard, some of the things that you've observed, and we've got some folks around the tables that are taking some notes, hopefully some copious notes, so that we'll have some takeaways. But Kevin, we'll turn things over to you.
Good afternoon. So it's still morning, right? Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning. Thank you, Pastor. As everyone knows, my name is Kevin Green, the COO of Lehigh Valley Faces, also the COO and co-founder of R2C2 Inc., which is a local nonprofit focused on youth development, especially the development of youth of color, especially male youth of color. Today, I would just like to say our point of our discussion in this roundtable is to get and attain a better understanding of wealth disparity. Because as we see from our report, that there's many layers and there's many things that we have to do to really combat our problem. Just to lay a little bit of the ground floor, for answers and questions and feedback for some of the questions, some of the areas of focus of discussion, if we can just try to keep it to about under 90 seconds so everyone can get through and we can have everyone to give a little feedback and get into some of the areas of focus that I'd like to touch on. So to start, what I would like to really start off with is probably the most basic question. I'd like to kind of focus this and ask you, Mr. Dent, is from everything that you've seen so far, from in your experience and also from this report, through our eyes, from a sense, is what does wealth disparity mean to you?
Well, like I said, I guess, I thought I sort of answered that, but income disparity, wealth disparity, is real. I mean, I'll say it again, it's real. But the issue is, how do you make sure that every person in our country has an opportunity for some level of success? And I accept the fact that there is always going to be income disparity in our country. There will be. In a market-based economy, it's inevitable. It just is. Some people are going to take more risks than others, and there's a greater reward. I accept that. But how do we make sure everybody has some kind of a foundation where they have an opportunity to move forward? And I think Bob Ruppel said it well, to the extent that every young person in this country has access to a good education is probably the best place to start. And even more important than that, I mean, like I said earlier, we have family disparities, and I think we can all understand too that the child who's born to two loving parents has some some material comfort. Don't have to be wealthy, but maybe can provide more, can make sure they're reading to their children, doing things, as opposed to maybe you see the challenges of a young girl in many cases, having a child on her own and having to raise it on her own, is that child's going to start at a greater disadvantage in many cases than the kid that comes from a more stable circumstance. And so, I mean, these are all issues, and I don't pretend to have the answer to that. I don't think anybody does. I mean, we've been dealing with this issue in this country for a very long time, and but I mean, it's really going to get back down to a reasonable, affordable, a quality education and a good start, and it's something that the government can play a role in, but we're not the only ones.
Would anyone else like to shed some light on what wealth disparity means to them from anything that they heard or just life journeys? Anyone?
I think one of the issues is that we talk a lot about the children's educational needs, and I would agree with that. And I think, again, that Bob did a good job of talking about you don't start in 9th grade. You start at the earliest point you can. But I think we're forgetting an important entity here, and that's the family, whatever that family looks like. And I think we have talked about introducing the possibilities to families and children. We need to do that more, but I think we need to turn that into expectations for educational attainment so that the child isn't doing it on their own, that the family nurtures that expectation from the time they enter school or even before. And then we provide them with the tools and resources and training so that the family feels confident in supporting their child through that process. So when you get into 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they are prepared to support their children the same way others who are second or third or fourth generation college attenders can, in terms of financial aid forms, SAT preparation, all of that. So we can't forget that family part of things. And I think, again, the community school idea concept reinforces that.
Well,
when I hear that we live in a market economy and there's always going to be disparities, to me, I think about the question, how many poor people are needed to support the wealth of a few people from the dominant culture? And so I think we're starting from different premises. I'd like us to think, what if we didn't have a market economy that allowed for always having disparities? What kind of world would we have if everyone is able to rise to a level of prosperity and not have a few people rise at the expense of others? And I get greatly concerned if we believe we are always going to have disparities, because we're not going to be able to solve any problem. We'll throw a few crumbs out and let a few people succeed, but the majority of the people in America will not. And that troubles me greatly.
I think from a corporate perspective, and somebody far wiser and at the time substantially older, probably I'm now as old as he was when he said this, but said, as CEO of Carpenter Steel out of Reading, said that successful corporations have an obligation to give back to the communities that help them be successful. And I think that's just a short sentence that stuck with me probably for the last 20 years. And I do think corporations, successful families, successful individuals have an obligation to help and give back and make a community. But they're not the only component of that village. And I was going to quote somebody, and I was afraid Alan would fall off his chair. But again, it takes a lot of people in a village to raise a child. But there's a lot of constituencies in that: the family, the churches, the schools, the corporate community, the wealthy community, the municipal part, the governmental part of communities. But I think if you take any one of those dominoes out of that process, the stream stops. So I think all of those pieces and the family structure, I think, is another one that many times doesn't take the responsibility that it should. One of the programs near and dear to my heart is urban scouting within the Boy Scouts. And I listen to these young kids that have maybe not as much going for them as other kids, and I watch them progress with not the same level of support, but I watch the benefits. I think it's programs like that. There's a lot of great programs out there, and we've got to figure. And they don't need just money. They need parents to show up. They need community people to show up. The kids need reinforcement. They need to be held accountable because their success is also their success.
So within kind of understanding our report, that kind of leads me into our next question, because I know the biggest thing that I think we all have a consensus on is education. So when we're looking at a person trying to attain wealth, do we now believe, from what we see from the data in this report, that race plays a part in when someone is on the journey to attain wealth? Do we feel that race plays a part? Anyone want to answer? Pastor? No?
I don't want to speak for them. I think other voices are important because I can monopolize the conversation very easily.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. I mean, I think we have to be realists. The answer is yes to that question. The question then becomes, what are we going to do about that? And for me, as the president of Northampton Community College, let me first of all say I'm happy that we can be the location to have this conversation, because the issues we're talking about today, I think, are very much the fundamental values of this college: access, economic opportunity, social justice, equity, and inclusiveness. I was happy to see in the report, top of page 11, I already circled it, our region's community colleges do outstanding work in providing high value for education dollars for our students. And I really do believe that community colleges are part of the solution. We've seen a 35% growth in our students of color over the past 5 years. Our Monroe campus actually has a majority of the students on that campus are students of color. And I think we're the kind of place that embraces and welcomes those students in a way that doesn't just talk about access, but talks about success. How do we help them as they leave here, really change the trajectory of their lives in meaningful ways? So we look for partners helping to make that happen. Charlie talked also about the workforce. I think the other real advantage of the community colleges is that we have an agility. I mean, I worked at Lehigh for 22 years, great place. I was a president of Liberal Arts College Wittenberg for 7 years. If you gave me a good idea, it would take me at least 2.5 years to move that through the faculty at Northampton. We can usually turn something around in about 6 months. So we're engaged in developing real job opportunities, mostly for moving folks from kind of low income wages into upper middle class sorts of jobs. We have a recent grant from the Department of Labor around healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and also logistics and transportation that will do just that. So I just want to make sure as we continue to have this conversation that community colleges are at the table. We're very invested in these issues and want to be part of that conversation because they're real issues for this community.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm very grateful to be part of this conversation. My name is Indradeep Ghosh. I'm a professor of economics at Haverford College. I'm on sabbatical leave this year, so this is an excellent opportunity for me to delve into some of these issues that I've been doing some research on. I'd like to speak to the education piece in particular because we are not living in a manufacturing economy anymore. We are living in a knowledge service economy, and the critical input for success, personal success, national success, business success in the contemporary economy is high quality human capital. And what that means is the capacity of individuals to work collaboratively with one another, to solve problems in a team environment, to be generous, to trust, to care for one another. And neuroscience research shows that these skills, these skills are developed critically in the ages of 0 to 5. So early childhood education and care is absolutely critical to develop the skills that are needed for personal, national business success in the contemporary world economy. And I also want to say that when it comes to early childhood education and care, there is no trade-off between efficiency and equity. So this idea that that inequality is efficient, or that social inequities are efficient, this idea is reversed, at least for early childhood care and education. There is enough research from the United States, from the United Kingdom, Sweden, Norway, France, Germany, and even the developing world, Uruguay, Argentina, India, that shows that preschool, good high-quality investment in preschool improves cognitive development, socio-emotional skills, reduces deviant behavior, reduces smoking rates. So that means also a lower reliance on public sector funds. It improves primary school performance all the way through primary school up to the teens. So investing in high quality early childhood education and care is efficient. It's important that the intervention has to be high quality. If it is low quality, it actually works in the opposite direction. So there's research from Canada showing that if you try to intervene in the early childhood years, but if the intervention is not high quality, it's going to have a harmful impact on children's development. But I also want to say that this also serves the goal of equity, because all of this research from around the world shows that high quality interventions in early childhood education and care disproportionately improve the lot of children of low educated mothers, lower socioeconomic status households, children of immigrants and minorities. So you're solving both problems at once. You're creating efficiency, but you're also solving the problem of inequity. And high quality parenting is also a critical component of building high quality human capital. There's research that shows that an economically disadvantaged child with high quality parenting is more advantaged than an economically advantaged child with low quality parenting. So I just want to say that this report's recommendation with respect to early childhood education is the one that speaks most loudly to someone like me. So I just want to...
Kevin. And so I just want to answer them. In my opinion, wealth disparity is a function of our values in this country. And these values have been concretized into our policies and practices. And so our systems reflect these policies and practices that are based on our values. So wealth disparity is a systemic problem, all right? In this country, we value people who have white skin more than we value people who have black and brown skin. And I think period.
Well, that actually segues perfect into a section that I actually want to talk about, a little bit of value and alarming facts.
One second, I'm just kind of working my way through. Well, so wealth disparity is a reflection of our values. We value white skin more than we value black and brown. Therefore, wealth disparity, that wealth gap, is a reflection of those values. And because it's concretized in practices and policies, it's systemic, our response to that has to be on the system level and not on the program level, because programs keep the system in place and help people be more comfortable with the disparity. So if we want to end the disparity, we've got to change our values with respect to who we value, and then those values, those new values, get concretized in these policies and practices, and therefore we can reduce the wealth disparity that's at least based on race. Does that make sense?
So speaking,
okay, now I'm done.
Now you're done? Okay. There's this one statistic that's actually not in this main report. This was information that we got actually on the first day, the first meeting of our task force. So I'd just like to go ahead and read some things that I pulled from that. Out of the 28 top organizations / nonprofits, we have 579 board members. Only 38 of them are people of color, 1 Asian, and 2 that associate with other. People of color make up 6% of the top influential bodies in the Valley. I'd like to read a direct quote from when we asked, were they satisfied? They were satisfied with the quality of people. So when we're talking about value and who we value, do you feel that decision-making bodies should reflect the actual community that they serve? I'd like to open that to anyone.
Let me answer that, take a stab at it, because I also wanted to reflect on one of the recommendations that was made. And I've had the honor probably over the last 15 years of serving on 15 or 20 what I think are pretty significant nonprofit boards in the Lehigh Valley. Every one of those boards has a diversity problem. But I will tell you, it's not for the lack of discussing it or trying to think on how to solve it. I would strongly recommend that the researchers, instead of just drawing that conclusion, would have also talked with the executive directors of what I consider to be, or what anybody considers to be, the more high-powered, beneficial, visible boards in this community. If they haven't figured out how to solve it, maybe the community can figure out how to solve it, okay? I do think you got to be careful in developing a different set of rules relative to attendance or relative to other board responsibilities for groups of people. But again, the boards that I'm on right now, I think take diversity very seriously, and would love tomorrow to add, significantly add to every one of those boards diverse candidates. They've tried, it hasn't worked. So maybe they need to try, and I understand the definition of stupidity or something is keep doing the same thing over again. Maybe they need to do something different. I think some of those people, whether it's, I see Jane back there talking, a great organization and a great board, or the Boy Scouts or the United Way or Valley Youth House or whoever it may be, get them together and say, how can we work together to solve this problem?
Among minorities on our boards and decision-making committees and what have you. And so, so what I'll say is that when I read that, I had the typical normal human reaction to that. Oh, well, here are the reasons why it's so difficult for me to do that. Here are the barriers. And then I began to realize, well, that's not going to get me anywhere. What can we do? How can I get around those barriers? And so to my colleagues at the other foundations, I would suggest that we spend more time talking about ways around the barriers or through the barriers or over the barriers to try and bring a more representative constituency to the decision-making committees and spend less time being aggravated by the data. And so, at least for the Community Foundation, I can tell you that this is being addressed seriously because we make it part of our agenda. It has to be on the agenda of the boards and the foundations across the valley. It has to be something that you address, and you have to stop whining about the barriers and address it, I think, as energetically as you possibly can. So, that's my 90 seconds.
Excellent. I know we have someone. I just want to give the crowd, and Tyrone will get to you right after. Dawn, correct?
Yes. I want to speak to Congressman Ben's point about stability growing up. I don't always think that it's the stability growing up that makes you have that welfare. I grew up in many foster homes and went to college and graduated magna cum laude, so it doesn't mean that you have to be in a stable home, whatever that looks like for anyone. And I think for a majority of people in this room who are of color, that many of us are on many boards, excuse me. There are not enough of us in the Lehigh Valley who are engaged on boards and foundations in this Lehigh Valley. I, in 2002, went through Project Blueprint, which is a program of the United Way and teaches minorities to be board members, teaches them fiduciary responsibilities, teaches them many things that they need to learn to be a good board member. And since then, I've probably been on 10, 15 boards. But that's too many. There need to be more people who are of color, who are on those boards of organizations that are representing people of color. You can't really have an organization who is speaking for a race of people that you don't even have members on the board that know what those people feel or have gone through or need in order to promote their causes or their people or their concerns in the community. So I think one of the things that was just brought up was that by Bernie, by Kevin, is that we need to be more engaged. Boards need to maybe go to places like Project Blueprint and find out if there are people on those who have gone through those programs who are able to sit on your board and represent those people that you are now trying to help and to engage in your community.
Thank you. Tyrone, I know you had something to say.
It's said. Just to add, a little cap on top of that. I do think I do think we have enough people. I think we have more than enough people here to serve on boards. I've met some of them. I work with some of them, right? What I think is that, and this goes to your point, Bob, about, and this is a mindset that I think a lot of people have. We don't want to change the rules and make adjustments for one group, right? Which in my opinion, I have an issue with that thinking. Because it's not an adjustment for the one group, it's an entire adjustment for the company, the board at hand, and the way that those people approach, these rules and regulations that have been set for people like them. So when you make those adjustments, you're making them because, there's some new faces that need to be accounted for, right? So someone said it earlier, if a meeting can't happen at 6 p.m. or 3 p.m., you make an adjustment because there are people out there who don't work those hours that you all, or we all, because I think I'm part of that group now, right, that we all work, right? So we make those adjustments because those are the people we need. A change and adjustment in rules isn't a decline in quality, right? And when I hear folks say things like that, that's what I hear them saying, right? We don't make adjustments for these groups because then we decline our quality, and I don't believe in that. I think we make those adjustments because those people that we're trying to get here have the skill and the knowledge that a lot of us don't possess, right? So it's important that we make those necessary adjustments to get them in place to help us make the best decisions. And also the other point is, when we're talking about the corporations giving back to the community, I think they do an excellent job. But they're giving back to those companies and those boards that look exactly like they do, right? So really, what are we changing in that giving process? To make them feel better about what they're doing, we have the boards be able to supply and give back to the community, but giving them in dysfunctional ways that really helps no one in the process. So my thing with all of that is, we have the people. We may have to make the adjustments to make sure we get those people to the table to provide their insight and their expertise for us to do better for our community.
Listening to that, and when I was kind of putting this together, I think what came in my mind right after, thinking about some of the things that I go through on a daily basis is, does this stat show clearly that certain bodies keep people of color out of power to affect their ability to create wealth? When you think about changing rules and creating value, do we believe that? Or does anybody have anything to say on that question?
Kevin, can you repeat the question a little louder, please?
That stat shows clearly, or what it kind of shows, certain bodies keep people of color out of power to affect their ability to create wealth.
So are you asking whether the exclusion is deliberate?
Correct, because as Tyrone just kind of basically illustrated, the fact that if you don't change the rules to keep everyone included, you exclude, and which is what's obviously the number shows that, and those are the rules that are in place. So is that something that's structurally there? And again, coming from a person of color that is that has the ability now to finally sit on some boards and make some decisions, I'm the only one there, and I don't see those rules changing. As I said, me and Tyrone, we just fell into this new pot. We weren't there before, because before I would not be able to make a meeting at 11 o'clock. I wouldn't be able to make this.
Yeah, I think, thanks to everybody for being part of this. I think, I don't want to believe that it is deliberate. I want to believe that it's clumsy, that it's maybe negligent, that it might be misinformed. I think that, our organization makes a commitment to diversity. I don't think our board has been less than 25% people of color in 25 years. We typically are 30-35%. But I think it's because we've made a special effort. I think it's that we've looked past, if you'll forgive the expression, the usual suspects. I think too often we go after the one or two or three people we know. So poor Julio keeps getting asked over and over, and Julio feels an obligation to represent his constituency, if you will, and he can't. He's got a job to do, and so I think what we're not doing enough is building the bench and calling on the bench to hit when we need them, and I think in the process that's where we really make the difference. So it's just a matter of making a special effort and making a few adjustments to accommodate people. And then when we do that and we still don't get them, we can start blaming people for deliberately excluding.
Yes, exclusion is intentional, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And that doesn't mean that people are evil. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. I think we gravitate toward people who are like us. We gravitate toward the familiar. And so that's what that's what I do. I think lots of us do that. And I don't know that we're practiced in this country with being encouraged to have divergent thinking, to be in a space where people are different from us, because it requires something of us. If people around us are different, then we have to be different. We've got to figure out something, and we're not encouraged to push ourselves like that. So, yeah, it's intentional because it's comfortable. That's my opinion.
Cliff?
I believe that we do have a lot of people in Lehigh Valley that serve the family. And I've been serving for many years. But I think the issue is not only to serve in nonprofit organizations, and that's what most of us get pulled into. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. But anyway, you can probably hear me if I stand up. I was standing up, by the way.
Don't be self-effacing. Not in this crowd.
Many of us have been serving in nonprofit organizations for many years, and it's true. There's few of us that actually serve more often than others, and we do have to create an atmosphere where we do more research on that in regards to not only research, but actually going to the corporation where they work. Many minorities work. They don't work in the white-collar type of jobs. The majority. They said no, but the minority that works in, and the statistic reflects that, the minority that works in, we are pulled everywhere, it's true. However, I don't want to be serving only in nonprofit organizations. I want to serve in corporates, in corporations. I want to serve in PBL boards. I want to serve in air products. I want to serve in the hospitals boards, and the college as a trustee, and the universities. Because I think there we have we're at a different level that we can actually make stronger impact. So we can develop, the earlier childhood education that the gentleman was talking about, and we can talk, bigger role models for those youth that are growing and going to college and coming back, and I see a lot of them coming back. I've seen people. I grew up in the projects myself, in the housing projects in Bethlehem, and being able to sponsor other people, sponsor a kid who actually went to Pembroke. Who lived in Pembroke with his family. Pembroke is a housing project in Bethlehem. And, the guy he went to college. He went to the same college I went to. And then he went to medical school. He's a pediatrician. And so somebody was talking about, there is opportunity. It's not just sitting, waiting for us to probably graduate from high school and go into a nonprofit world that most of us do. But we have an opportunity to do other things if we are encouraged. And the recommendation on education is perfect. I would say not 30 and 50 scholarships. I would say let's make 100, 200 scholarships and more available for some of those students. Because we have the population. If you look at the Allentown School District, over 65% is Hispanic alone. 80%, over 80% is minority. So that's the workforce of the future in the whole city of Allentown, the largest city in the area, and the third largest city in the state. And that's prevalent in Reading, Lancaster, York, Harrisburg, Philadelphia. So if we look at the state level, it's just going to be, and we got to do something now. We can't wait because other people are going to be taking care of you and me when we get older. And we want to make sure that we have equitable and good people taking care of us that know what they're doing. So that's my little.
Thank you for your input. I know some.
And he kind of mentioned, and that is, I wonder, and I'm not defending this at all, but I wonder how much a function of that
board participation is a function of the wealth gap that we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation. And to bring back to that wealth gap, and I think the thing we all agree on is the education piece and how important that is. And I tell you, I just wonder when we're going to fund it equitably. Like, when are we just going to say, sorry, I'm passionate about this. When are we going to say, as Lehigh Valley, enough? Every kid gets the same investment. No matter where you live, no matter who you are, no matter what color you are. Because I want to live in a city, and my kids go downtown, and if I were willing to live in a McMansion in the middle of nowhere, my kids would have an iPad, and they'd have a music class every week. But I don't want to live in a McMansion in the middle of nowhere. I want to live in a city. We need to stand up in the Lehigh Valley together and do it.
And my children were at Barnett Elementary receiving as good as an education as they could get, because that school services low-income minorities. I turned left and moved in with my grandparents just so my children could get a better education, because I've seen firsthand what that does. I'm a high school dropout and a college graduate, because I'm an NCC alumni. I'm at West Coast School working on a bachelor's. The thing I keep hearing here is education. We have to teach people, because if they don't learn, they're not going to know what they don't know. And that's where places like the colleges come in place, and boards. Education is important, and to me, I'm passionate about that. And the fact that I still have to talk with my children, because they're Black and Puerto Rican, and I still have to tell them there are going to be people out there that are going to judge you by your skin color. That upsets me as a parent, and those are the conversations that need to be had today.
Thank you. Michelle,
clearly we're hearing that education connects to the family. That's not just at school, but what you bring home to enrich the family environment. I just wanted to circle back to underscore the importance of pre-K that was already mentioned. The data isn't in this report, but will be in our upcoming State of the Lehigh Valley report. I looked at the percentage of students enrolled in 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in pre-K education in the Lehigh Valley by school district, and sure enough, there's a strong, statistically significant correlation between median income levels and the percentage of students in these school districts enrolled. So what I'm saying is that as median income levels in school districts increase, so does the percentage of students enrolled in these pre-K programs. So again, circling back to the relationship between income and race, how income is a component of wealth, it is very important that we recognize this need in the Lehigh Valley.
You know, I feel like you guys were writing this one quickly into kind of our next topic, and I think we're all kind of on the same consensus of, you know, what can create wealth is quality education. In most cases, the best way to gain a quality level of income to create wealth is to have a quality education. So I'd like to go ahead and read from the summary of stats. The lowest achievement levels exist in schools located within areas whose population have the highest concentration of residents of color. When we take a look at that, we know that schools with the majority of students being of color are underachieving, to say the least. There are many studies, as he's alluded to, that show that if you have a quality early childhood education, you have a higher chance of success in grade school or high school. Reading our direct recommendation, which I think everyone keyed on, every child from low-income family, especially in urban communities, should have access to quality pre-K education. So knowing that education is a major key to gain the income to create wealth, but also knowing that the ability to gain the quality education, early childhood education, is a key to that. My question is, do you feel that the lack of early childhood education in urban communities has been used as a tool to create wealth disparity? Because race does matter. Go ahead.
As
As an educational practitioner, John Reinhardt from Easton Schools, I first of all value this conversation, and I'm very grateful that I was extended an invitation to appear today. I don't know, my reaction to what you just said is that I've been around the Lehigh Valley long enough to know that there are lots of people trying to change the opportunities. And I think that wisdom has it that those opportunities for pre-K experiences for kids must change. However, the level where I don't think the message is getting is at the decision-making level in Harrisburg and federal level. I don't think those folks are listening to what all the research says about pre-K opportunities. And they certainly don't pay attention to the notion that it's tough to be poor anywhere. Because where I'm heading is that making all of this tougher for kids and schools and educational opportunities is the system of high-stakes education that is currently in place, which in my opinion is one of the most blatant discriminatory practices I've ever witnessed in my 43 years as an educator. Because the schools who are the neediest schools are sitting in positions where their funding sources have been cut. They face the challenges of poverty, of language, barriers that include health, nutritional issues. Those schools are the schools that need the best we can offer. And the system of high-stakes testing is blatantly showing by the comparison of scores that those schools are not moving in the same direction as those in the suburbs and those who are where their population is coming from higher income levels. And I guess one of the things that I would say to you, as you talk about opportunities for all and you talk about the need for us to use education, because I do believe Ms. Ruppel is right on target. If we attack educational disparity and inequity, we will eventually will eliminate the financial disparity. That will happen. I also told him that sizzle is well and alive in Easton, by the way. But where I was heading is, as a group, we have to look at what that does. And I'm going to tell you from an insider, this is what's happening. The scores come out and they're published. And quite frankly, the focus on the focus on the Common Core is a side argument. I don't think that's important at all. What is important is that there's this notion that you can ignore poverty. But I don't know where that came from. I don't know if No Child Left Behind decided, well, we're just going to pretend people aren't poor anymore and kids don't come from poor homes, and we're just going to say, oh, no matter what, you're going to get scores up. The point is that this is leading to a horribly discriminatory set of circumstances. Because from an insider's point of view, teachers and administrators are going to be tagged and ultimately paid by the achievement levels in those schools, in all schools in the Commonwealth. Now I ask the question, what young teacher, what talented teacher, what talented young administrator, or talented old administrator for that matter, is going to want to choose to go in a school that's in an urban center, or where the scores have historically been low? We're going to ruin the opportunities that should be there for kids because we have the system of comparing this school to this school. What we should be doing, and it's accountability on the inside, is saying to me, your schools haven't moved from here to here in the last year, and they need to move from here to here. Now, you need to get busy. But I don't think it's fair that my schools, or Allentown, or Bethlehem schools, are compared to the schools from neighboring suburban districts where they do not face the tough daily issues of the poor. I'm not sure where I was headed. I just felt I really needed to tell you that added to the issues related to whether or not we're able to attack this whole issue of disparity, inside of there is this very, very important consideration for all of us. We really need to look closely at what we're doing in those schools and making sure that we support the programs, communities and schools, community schools, and all those other opportunities that we have to try to overcome what appears to be a tremendously growing, challenging set of circumstances for urban schools.
Thanks for your input.
At the risk of having two superintendents in a row talk, and nobody really wants to hear that. But, Joe Roy from Bethlehem Area School District. John always gets me going. I wanted to mention that, as we sit here today, there is a tendency to blame the schools, and we hear, it's about education. It is about education. But, as we sit here today, it's in all the urban districts, it's the teachers, the counselors, the principals, the nurses who are dealing with the realities of childhood poverty right now, every single day. We deal with the kids. Our counselors, we help with finding housing. We help with immigration issues. We deliver health services in our schools, dental services, vision services. We provide mental health services in our schools with our community partners. We provide clothing at this time of year when kids come to school without the proper clothing. So we have this enormous challenge of treating the symptoms of poverty. At the same time, we're trying to give the kids the skills to get them out of poverty. It's kind of like someone comes in, they're going to run a marathon. They come in with 2 broken legs and morbidly obese. So, okay, we can treat those symptoms. Let's get training. Let's get going. You're working. They go home. They come back with a broken arm. All right, now we got to treat that, but let's keep going. We're going to run that marathon. That's the challenge we face, I think, in treating the symptoms. At the same time, we're trying to move kids ahead. And a piece of it does come down to funding. I mean, John mentioned some state-level things. This state has made choices not to raise taxes. That had an impact on public education. Funding does matter, and it's not a matter. We need an equitable funding system. A lot of talk in the state right now about that, which is extremely important. But not equal funding, because schools have different needs. We need more funding. Our kids need more. And that's sometimes, everyone will agree, oh yeah, everyone should have equal funding. You don't get so much agreement from districts that don't serve the same students we serve when you say, well, actually, we need more per student than you have, because our kids have more needs. And I think that's a conversation we need to be willing to have publicly as well. We need more investment for our kids, not equal investment for our kids.
Charlotte Church. I think one of the issues that is critical here is accountability and awareness. And this conversation is healthy because I believe it unifies a community. What we've been able to do in Easton was to bring awareness to the issues of inequity and imbalance, from hiring to the achievement gap, so forth and so on. Mr. John Reinhardt has been a great superintendent that allows us to come to the table and say, listen, we have an issue. Let's talk honestly about what the issue is. And then let's begin to put together an action plan so we can move towards bringing some solutions to the table. But then with that awareness goes accountability, that there needs to be timelines and deadlines so we can say we're moving measurable benchmarks, if you will. So we're moving towards a sustainable change that will ultimately decrease the achievement gap, decrease the wealth disparity gap, but it has to begin at conversations like this. And so even for the boards that are here, Lehigh Valley and so forth, that many times they just don't know better. So it's the norm, right? The system is the system, and so we do what we do. We feel like we're having a good impact, but when someone approaches the board and says, hey, listen, how about diversity? And says, would you consider moving towards changing the meetings or doing something to add some diversity to your board? I believe that these are well-meaning people. Right? The boards are not in place to withhold wealth. It's there to impact the community. in a positive way. So I think accountability and awareness is critical, in having a unified voice that says to all of our board members, to all of our corporations, listen, we're coming as a unified group, and we're coming with awareness and accountability to say, hey, listen, we're here to serve, and we want to serve as a unified group to be able to bring some lasting change. And so I appreciate this conversation. Thank you to Alan, thank you to Greg, and all of those that served on the board, because it's things like this that I think are going to help propel and move us forward from where we are.
Thank you, Pastor Davis. I know we had a person in the gallery. Just one more last comment on this.
Thank you very much. Jane Urban from Community Services for Children. We operate Head Start programs and pre-K counts programs across the Lehigh Valley. And I did want to address the issue of funding. We currently serve 12% of the eligible children in Head Start and Early Head Start programs across the Lehigh Valley. That means children who are at 100% of poverty, that's the poorest of the poor, 12% are being served. That's strictly a function of funding. It's what it is. It's whether or not our community, our state, and our nation will support funding for very low-income children in high-quality early learning. And just as something to get thinking about this, the international tests that are given from time to time that compare countries' test scores in reading, science, and math show that the United States is woefully behind many other countries, including China, Japan, India, Korea, Latvia. I don't even know where Latvia is. But in any event, the one key point that was across all the tests was that those students who had early childhood education were more successful in every single country around the world. So it should say something to the United States that if we want to be competitive economically and fiscally in the new world economy, we better start paying attention to those little kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last gallery comment.
Quickly on behalf of the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation, whose task is to promote economic growth and development in this region, and whose job is to market the economic assets of the Lehigh Valley. We applaud anything that the task force does to improve the quality of those assets. So investments in early childhood education that lead to a higher quality workforce, and Nancy, I'm sure would agree, are applauded from our perspective. In reading the report, I was interested to see the mention of entrepreneurship as a path to wealth creation. LVEDC's council, the Women in Minority Business Opportunity Council, is directly engaged with Dawn Ferrante, somebody that you can speak to about participation in that council, directly involved in increasing opportunities for minority business opportunities. So again, this is a good conversation. Our job is to kind of grow this economy so that there's wealth creation opportunities for all. To the extent that there are investments made as a result of this task force actions on our workforce, we're very happy.
And just real quick to follow up on that. So I'm the staff liaison at LVEDC for the Women in Minority Owned Business Council. And I just wanted to we had a panel, this is Global Entrepreneurship Week, and Wednesday night we celebrated women in the Lehigh Valley that were entrepreneurs. It was extremely successful. But I just wanted to bring up, we were discussing at the women's panel this issue of inequality with women in the workforce and of course with being equitably compensated. And I was in IT consulting for the first 2/3 of my career and spoke up and said that at one point I challenged the leadership of the organization, the firm that I was working for, to take a look at the inequalities that I suspected were there, partially because my colleague told me what he made when we were having a cocktail one night. But I knew what he made, and I knew that we were equal. And I challenged as far as our experience, I challenged our leadership to take a look at that. And of course, no surprise, it was 10 to 15% lower when everything was taken equally that women made in the firm. And the leadership, just to your point, I can't see your name, the gentleman in the red tie, just to support your point, and many others that have said, is it purposeful? The leadership at this firm, who were all white men, were deeply shocked and concerned that there was such an inequality. And when I met with them one-on-one, they said, I went home and told my wife, and she freaked out and told me, get back in there and fix that. These weren't bad people. They were all good guys, really good guys. But I kept saying to them, you're not a bad guy. We just have to keep looking at it. We get comfortable. Everything that everyone said, we have to keep pushing ourselves out of that comfort zone and keep looking at it again and again. And then we'll get to the point where I think we can make some true change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyrone, do you have something to say closing?
Hi, I'm Nancy from the Lehigh Valley Workforce Investment Board, and we have on the average of 300 people that walk in the building every day through the workforce system, and they want work. And they not only are minorities, or women, they look like us also. So there's more to this than just, I'm probably the biggest supporter of pre-K. Jane, that's one component of what we have to begin to look at, right? And we are, and a lot of that takes money. But during the high school experience, being in the school districts to ensure that we're aligning education with workforce development, that it goes on constantly. It's an integration of this beginning to happen. So our process begins with pre-K, it starts with education, it blends workforce development into it, it has rapid response teams that allow us to prevent dropouts, because we have to capture them as they're dropping out and get them into something else. Because right in our building, there are, on the average right now, of 400 dislocated workers sitting in our building right now with degrees from Lehigh, Moravian, Muhlenberg, community colleges. So there's a scenario of all of this together that we as a community need to look at to begin to say, yes, pre-K through the long-term unemployed, and there's diverse populations in all of them, that we have to take care of the entire community in order to make this work, because there are more of us out in the workforce right now and coming out than there are in the schools. So we have to deal with this population too, because we have to keep the economy running. And the other thing, I have a board of directors, and I need minorities on my board. Is there a list somewhere? Is there a group? Is there a meeting? Is there a monthly place I could go to kind of talk to people to get minorities on my board? And please see me after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I want to say thank you to all of you for being in here. A couple of people asked me, so what's the difference between this report and so many other reports that we have received? And I would like to say to all of you, there's something in here. You were invited here today with a purpose, obviously. You are a very important piece of this puzzle. And there's a piece, I promise you, if you did not read it all, go through it again and read it, because there's a sentence in here for you to consider, to think about it, and to then be part of making justice for all. And Nancy, yes, to your question, the answer to your question is yes. There's a list right in front at the end of the report. The members of this task force to begin with, which, like Tyrone said, and Phyllis, I believe so, we do not only our leaders in our community, but we also have many other friends, and be glad to serve because we have, and be glad to connect you with other leaders, minorities in our community that are ready to serve. So,
right,
definitely.
We're glad to serve as long as the board also does this work. So we come, many of us may have gone through Project Blueprint. We've done our work, we're prepared. But if the board hasn't done its work and hasn't negotiated the misinformation they have about people who are different from them, then it's not going to be a good experience. So everybody's got to do a little work in order to have boards that are diverse.
I promise.
And I definitely want to thank everybody for taking the time to be a part of this discussion. In closing, I just want to leave with kind of a quick personal story. This report puts numbers and data to issues of wealth that most people of color already know and experience in their daily lives. I have personally been in situations where the color of my skin was the only reason I was not able to advance the way others of non-color have under the same circumstances. My company and I held our monthly professional social at one of the best venues in the Valley. A majority of our attendees are people of color. We were told that yes, we did a great job and that the venue made money, but we were the wrong color, verbatim. That was the reason we could not book another date with them, and through that whole process, we received the runaround. This shows us no matter if you do everything right,
Exactly.
race matters when it comes to gaining wealth in the Lehigh Valley and in America. So I just want everyone to leave with that yes, there's a lot of things that we need to work on, but there's certain behaviors that are going on that we can't control by early childhood education that we need to change, and we need to hold everyone accountable to that. I believe we can do it, and I believe the opportunity and the people are here to do it. So again, I want to thank everyone for being a part of this discussion, and let's take some action steps and make some things happen.
So once again, thank you for coming. I will say these are important conversations. Someone once said that change happens at the rate of trust. And so you took a Friday morning to come out when you could have been someplace else and to trust a few of us to talk about a hot button topic like race. We're good in the Valley at a lot of stuff. One of the things that we're good at is being very superficial in our conversations. And if we're going to really fix this thing, it's going to take a village. And it's going to take transformation. But, my mama told me you can't be transformed unless you're transparent. Which means you got to keep it real. And part of that is having divergent conversations at the table. And not demonizing different folk, right? Just because somebody's different doesn't mean they're deficient. It means they're different. And so thank you for coming. Please make sure that you place your name on I think there's a registration list outside. And we're going to have continued conversations around this. So the task force, next steps, is going to aggregate the information. We're going to meet. We're going to disseminate, I believe, some information out to all the attendees. And we're going to reconvene. Because we're not going to be one of those task force that kind of admire the problem. We had a conversation. We put the report back into the file. We say amen, go home, slap each other on the back. We're actually going to do something and begin to effectuate change. So thank you all, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.